Hey, it's Ollie, and I want you to imagine for a sec that you make me president of the world, and I get to decide exactly how languages are taught in schools, and money is no object. We can do anything we want. What are some of the things that I would do to change language education? I'm going to give you 8 things which I think would result in far better language learning in schools across the board. So let's get into it. Number 1, I would stop forcing kids to speak. There is this general perception that in order to learn a language, you have to speak, and that learning a language means speaking it. And as a result, a lot of the time in language education, people are kind of just shoehorned into speaking from the beginning. Class number 1, you learn to introduce yourself, then you practice it, you're speaking. But the problem is, for a 11, 12-year-old kid, or whatever age they are, to be suddenly turning to their classmates and being forced to say stuff in a strange new language, it makes no sense for them. There's no reason for them to do it. There's no authentic motivation for them to do that. And also, over the course of their language education, they're not going to get the chance to speak this language authentically with real people. Probably not until they're much older, not until they become adults. So you're teaching them to do something that doesn't make sense for them to do at this point in their lives. So I would stop this focus on speaking, and I would certainly end any kind of testing of speaking, and instead focus on other methods. So what would those other methods be? Well, this brings us to number 2, which is storytelling in class. For me, my classes would be just chock full of storytelling. And this is already done in some communities. TPRS community do a fantastic job of this. But the thing about storytelling is that, you see, with stories, we already have a common language. Kids already know what a story is. They know what it means to follow the plot of a story, to get to know the characters. And by doing live storytelling in class, what you can do as the teacher is to actually create this understanding of the language there in the class with the kids through the medium of story. Now, my story learning method, which is how I teach languages, is geared towards adults because it's mostly self-study. But the great thing that you can do in a live classroom is actually have the teacher as the storyteller and bring the kids along with them on a journey while teaching them the language at the same time. So lots and lots and lots of storytelling in class. Number 3, I would mandate that other school subjects be taught in the target language. So for example, if the language that you're learning is French at school, then I would make history be taught in French, or science be taught in French, or whatever made the most sense. This is actually done more and more abroad in places like Spain, where there are special schools which teach things like science in English. It's known as CLIL, which is Content Language Integrated Learning, and it is one of the most powerful ways to get younger kids as well, especially younger kids, to learn a new language. You're teaching them the thing that they need to know in the language, and over a period of years, they build up this real competence in the language because actually they're studying real subjects in the language. Number 4, no more tests. Get rid of tests altogether. What is the point of a test other than to have some kind of centralized way of testing kids and understanding whether the system is working or not? But we all know that languages don't work like that. There's no such thing as learning the fact that you memorize a bunch of words for a test, or memorize a bunch of kind of phrases, spoken phrases for a speaking test, and then you get graded on it and you get a result. Like that means it's totally and utterly meaningless beyond the need for ministries of education and for school systems to kind of judge, like find some kind of measure of progress and judge kids. Now, you do obviously need some way to measure the success of your teaching in a school, but language tests are not the way to do it. Instead, I would focus all attention on fostering an interest in the language and a love of the language in the kids. Because as soon as you remove, there's so much teaching to the test that's done. You have an end of term test, and so the teachers have to teach the kids stuff that they need for that test. But if you remove the need for those tests altogether and you trust in the teachers, then you're able to actually do creative things in class, things that can inspire and motivate kids. So no more tests. Number 5, I would have large libraries in every single school where there is a huge stock and a huge range of different material in the language. And this can range from comic books to history books to magazines, whatever it may be. Because when kids take language classes at school, everything's imposed on them. Thou shalt learn this because I say so is basically the way it's done. But with a library full of interesting material, what kids can do is explore things that they're interested in the language. And if they can find things that they like, things that capture their attention, things that motivate them, then that's how they can actually fall in love with the language. So lots and lots of libraries with lots of cool stuff in them, please. But what would you do with all this wonderful reading material? Well, you do number 6, which is to have lots of free voluntary reading time in class, which means as part of the school timetable, you have time that is set aside specifically for free voluntary reading. This is Stephen Krashen's term, which means that kids will literally go and choose whatever they want to read freely and sit and read it. It's as simple as that. This is what kids do in their native language of their own volition, and so we want to encourage them to do exactly the same thing in the target language, because then you give them the chance to just foster this love for whatever it is that they find, and then to read freely, read for themselves. So lots of free voluntary reading time in class, rather than insisting on just trying to structure everything, plan everything out in advance. Number 7 is to help every individual child find their own reason for learning the language. So much of language education in schools falters from the beginning because it's just an arbitrary thing that's imposed. You must learn French, you must learn Spanish, but with no real reason to do it, you can't get people motivated. And so it's vital to spend time with kids, talking to them about all the different things that exist in this linguistic world of whatever language it is that they are learning, and helping them to foster some kind of love or interest in that language. If you're learning Spanish, then how exciting is this world of Spanish football, for example? If you're learning Japanese, are kids interested in anime, robotics? I don't know, whatever it may be. Every language, every culture has such a rich variety of stuff in it. And kids often simply just need to know about it and be introduced to it, because once they find their own reason for learning, once they figure out for themselves why the language matters, then you have a chance of actually really doing something useful with the language over the duration of their school career. And lastly, number 8, I would mandate exchange programs for everybody. Obviously at immense cost. Whatever language it is you're learning, I would make it mandatory for kids to do exchanges, school exchanges in another country. And this is particularly important for kids in places like the UK and the US, where we don't really know what goes on in the big wide world. I remember doing an exchange to France when I was 14 or something like that, and it was totally eye-opening, because I realized, hang on, there's a real world out there with real people doing things that I like to do just like me. They're just speaking a different language, and that really opened my eyes to the world. So I would make it mandatory that every kid has to go on at least one, but ideally 10 exchanges to another country whilst they're at school. So there we go. Those are the 8 things that I would mandate if I were president of the world, to make sure that to improve language education at school. Now I want you to let me know in the comments, what is one thing that you would change about the school system if you had all the power? Let me know in the comments. And then don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you back for the very next video.